I'm calling the Board of Education regular meeting to order. Okay, sorry. The first thing is I'm opening a public hearing for the long-term independent study during distance learning. So the public hearing is...
So we're going to ask Ashley to open up the chat box if you would like to speak to this issue related to a public hearing requirement that we have regarding long-term independent study during distance learning. You would include your name in the chat box. And if you are using a different handle than your name, please notate that so we know which person we need to open up. So we'll leave the chat box open for a minute. Ashley, is it open right now?
It is open.
Okay. This is just a requirement that we have to do by the new code. You heard from Eric Smith and Becky Lofton at our last meeting. Okay, I don't see anybody. So you want to close it, Ellen?
So I will close the public hearing on long-term independent study during distance learning, and I will open a public hearing on the sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials.
Again, we will open up the chat box. This is just a requirement that we have that requires a governing board every year. We have to do this, I believe, in the first 9 weeks. Is that it, Cliff? The first 9 weeks of the school year? To hold a public hearing.
By the 8th week.
By the 8th week.
I will say I'm very happy to see that we will be complying with the FAIR Act. That was nice. Good.
Always
we don't
good
have any,
to follow the law.
Yeah, we don't have anything in the chat for this.
Okay, so I'm closing that public hearing. And moving on, adoption and approval of the agenda for September 22nd.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, and now on to something fun, special recognitions, reports, and presentations. Students of the month for September 2020. We will start with Kenilworth Junior High.
Okay, so I'm just going to make sure I get everybody from Kenilworth in so they can talk and everything. So one moment.
Cool.
Student of the Month, September 2020. Kenilworth Junior High is proud to our September Student of the Month, William Zell. William has been chosen Student of the Month because he is one of Kenilworth's most outstanding students and exemplary citizens. William is the kind of person and student any school would be proud to have. Impressively, William maintained a 4.0 grade point average during both in-person and distance learning while a student at Kenilworth. According to Mr. Eklund, William's history teacher, William is one of those students who really makes teaching such a rewarding experience. He is engaging and comes to class with all kinds of questions and thoughts about not just the topics of class, but items that are related and interesting. He is truly a joy to have in class. William is terrific in my science class, added Mr. Granger. William is also upbeat and comes into Zoom classes with a heartfelt greeting. He follows along, participates, keeps up with his assignments and other students and with technology issues. He is everything we hope our students will be doing during distance learning. He is a terrific choice for Student of the Month. William is truly Kenilworth's Renaissance man. Not only is he an outstanding student, but he is not in school when you can find him hiking, gardening, traveling, and working on restoring his 1956 Chevy. William is also a valuable member of the Petaluma Panthers football team. William was proud to share that he and the Panthers took third place in a tournament played in Canton, Ohio, home of the National Football League's Hall of Fame. After high school, William would like to attend the University of San Diego and possibly pursue a career in architecture, nursing, or teaching. William's mom, Rachel, shared William is very thoughtful in school and in life in general. He puts effort and thoughts into everything he does. Congrats, William.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we,
And is Grace here?
are we still on Kenilworth?
Yes, we have one more student from Kenilworth.
Okay.
Kenilworth Junior High School is proud to introduce our September Student of the Month, Grace McFarland. Grace has been chosen Student of the Month because she is one of the Kenilworth best and brightest students. Grace is truly a shining star and a ray of sunshine in all of her classes. Grace comes to school every day ready to work with a smile on her face. Grace has maintained excellent grades at Kenilworth both in person and during distance learning. Positive, cheerful, leader, and a delight to have in class are just a few of the superlatives Grace teachers used to describe her. Mrs. Chavez, Grace advanced English teacher, enthusiastically shared. Grace is a wonderful student. She's always willing to share her ideas and stories from experience, and she is kind towards others. I really enjoy having her as a student. Mr. Raya, Grace's history teacher, added, Grace is enthusiastic and energetic during Zoom. History classes step up to be a leader during breakout sessions, and she turns in outstanding work. Besides being an outstanding student and citizen, Grace also participates in a variety of curricular activities. She is a dedicated athlete. Grace has been a member of the Girl Scout since she was in kindergarten, and she is now a junior scout leader. Grace plays soccer, lacrosse, and was a member of the Colts 7th grade basketball team. Impressively, Grace received a post-game ball signed by the opposite Marin lacrosse team for exemplifying good, outstanding sportsmanship. After high school, Grace would like to attend UC Irvine or UC Santa Barbara and pursued either a career in cancer research or own her own bakery. Grace's mom, Gada, added that Grace has solid morals, is kind-hearted, and very nurturing. We're very proud of her. Congratulations, Grace.
Congratulations. Is she here? Thank you, Kenilworth. We are moving on to Petaluma Junior High.
Okay, let me just get everybody from PJHS in.
Okay.
The only person I'm not seeing is Scarlett Sutherland, one of the presenters. So Scarlett, if you're here, please raise your hand with the Zoom feature. Okay, I'm not seeing Scarlett.
Was she presenting both students?
No, she's presenting one of the students. So if, let's see, if Katya, if you want to present your student, feel free, go for it. Oh, she's not here anymore either.
Should we move on to CASA and then come back to Petaluma Junior?
Oh, wait.
Hello?
Hi, Katia. We can hear you now.
Okay. We are honored to present August Cuneo as one of our September 2020 Students of the Month. August was born in nearby Santa Rosa on September 5th, 2007, and has been attending Petaluma City Schools since early elementary school. He's an all-around excellent student athlete and one who always puts forth his best effort in all of his endeavors. August enjoys school and works hard. He has straight A's on his PJHS transcript and is continuing to do excellent work with the distance learning model. His PE teacher comments, August is often the first volunteer in online class activities and discussions. He also completes all his work with quality too. As an athlete, August is strong, dedicated, and focused. Baseball is his primary love. He has played on teams such as Petaluma National Little League and has been a member of several travel teams over the years. August has a great arm, and his favorite positions are shortstop, pitcher, and catcher. He is hoping to continue his baseball career through high school and into college. August has many other interests. He enjoys hiking, biking, fishing, family activities, and hanging out with his friends. He loves participating in special school sports. As a fourth grader at McNair, he and his classmates raised money for schools in the Amazon. August was rewarded for his efforts by being selected to be part of a small group of students who presented the project to Jan Goodall at Chrissy Field in San Francisco. His parents add, August is a mature, responsible student with the ability to think of others. He has volunteered his time with Petaluma National Little League and the Miracle League, both in line with his passion for baseball. Time management skills have allowed August to be successful both academically and on the field. As a 4.0 student at PJHS, a 5-time All-Star player in baseball, I look forward to seeing where it takes him. August Cuneo is one of those all-around amazing students. We are proud to have August represent Petaluma Junior High School as a Student of the Month.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is the other presenter here, Ashley?
No, but I think Kelly said Dana may be able to let me promote her.
Hello, I can read our other bio. So we are proud to present Sophia Shirk as one of our September 2020 Students of the Month. Sophia is a highly capable and motivated individual who looks forward to creating a happy, healthy, and productive life. Sophia was born on October 23, 2007 in nearby Santa Rosa, has been a part of our district since early elementary school. Academically, Sophia is a great student. She works hard to maintain her grades and earned nearly all A's in 7th grade, many of which are A+. Not surprisingly, Sophia's teachers have a lot of positive things to say. Her Spanish teacher comments, Sophia is a great student and is very kind. Her 7th grade history teacher adds, she goes under the radar a lot, but she was phenomenal. Outside of school, Sophia loves to cook and bake. She participated in track and field events and won a ribbon in the long jump at the West Side Relays in 6th grade. Sophia plans to continue running track while in high school and looks forward to attending college to continue her education. Her parents comment, we are very proud of Sophie. She has had such a positive attitude through these unusual times. We are very pleased to honor this caring and hardworking young woman, Sophia Shirk, to the board and are pleased to have her represent PJHS as Student of the Month.
Congratulations. Awesome. We've got some amazing kids in our district. Okay, moving on to Casa Grande High School.
All right, let me add everybody in.
I'm presenting for Casa. Hold on.
Okay, Casa Grande is proud to present Jacob Isola as the September Student of the Month. Born in Santa Rosa and raised in Petaluma, Jacob Isola is an ambitious individual whose placement in accelerated classes dates back to the 7th grade. While making the top 10 in his class all of his years at Casa Grande, he's also participated in wrestling and football, wrestling being his main focus. He has wrestled since 7th grade and plans on finishing his 6th year this year to achieve the Ironman Award. He enjoys working out and volunteering. His volunteering includes helping victims of the tragic fires, helping veterans renovate their homes, and helping intellectually challenged adults. His favorite subjects in school are math and science. While excelling at English, he simply enjoys the numbers and their various applications. He hopes to become the second in his family to attend college and plans to go to a 4-year university. He aspires to become an investment banker.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. I'm also proud to present Saperna Kampali in the September Student of the Month. Saperna Kampali is a 16-year-old inspiring data scientist with a strong interest in STEM subjects, especially science, mathematics, and computer science. She's also very passionate about environmental change. The devastating annual fires in recent years have inspired her to start the Sustainability Club to promote environmental awareness within the Casa Grande community. Saperna has been an active member of Casa Grande tennis team. Sorry if you hear barking in the back. I'll say this quick, past 3 years, and was elected co-captain of the girls team sophomore year. She has also played badminton since her freshman year and worked her way up to the #1 varsity girls spot last year. She loves to travel and has visited many countries in Europe, Asia, and North America. During quarantine, she has started painting and biking to keep busy, as well as going on hikes with her family. Saperna can't wait to come back to school and enjoy her senior year with all her friends. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you, Casa Grande. And finally, Petaluma High School.
And I believe we only have one from Petaluma High tonight.
Okay.
Hi. Okay, so today I will be talking about Fernanda Vasquez. Fernanda is a senior at Petaluma High that has strived towards achieving academic excellence. She has taken courses like AP World and AP World US or AP US History, along with Honors Chemistry and Honors Math 3E. This year, she is taking multiple challenging classes like AP Economics and AP Literature. Two of her favorite classes, though, are AP Calculus AB and AP Physics. She describes it as going in between the very thin boundaries of math and science, if there are any boundaries at all. Math and science are only a few of her passions, as she has been in Petaluma High's jazz band, drumline, and concert band since she was a freshman. She plays piano for the varsity jazz band, keyboard for drumline, oboe for the concert band, and also alto saxophone for the marching band. Fernanda firmly believes that music is just as important as science and math because she believes that music is the language of all and for all of people. Fernanda is also a co-president of the Tri-M, a music honor society for the PHS band, along with all of the band presidents, helped raise around $5,000 for the music program this summer. She looks forward to pursuing a career in science while maintaining music in her life, with the goal of working for NASA one day as an astrophysicist. As a soon-to-be first-generation college student, she most of all wants to make her hardworking mother proud because Fernanda knows she has more opportunities and plans on using them to the fullest extent. Congrats.
Congratulations. Thank you. I always enjoy that part. I love our students. They're amazing. Okay, we are moving on to secondary in-person instruction planning update.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that slide?
Yep.
All right. So I'm just going to give a brief update on our secondary in-person, also called hybrid instruction planning. When the district moved to return in distance learning, based on the limitations provided by the state and the tiers and all that. We kind of paused in our hybrid planning, knowing we had a little bit of time. So there hasn't been much movement since our working group reached this point, but I'm going to go over this briefly, and then you'll see it again in another presentation in just a minute. So just wanted to share, over the summer, our working group of staff, site admin, district personnel, we looked at a number of options for what a secondary in-person model could look like, including what if students only took 3 courses at a time, not all 6. So that first model in the upper left was an example of students taking 3 on one day, and then splitting students into cohorts of halves and taking 3. The other cohort would take their first 3 on the other day and just keep the rotation going. We looked at cohorts of, if we were able to divide the students in groups of 2 for each class, what would that look like? Which has its own issues. We also looked at if students only took 3 courses at a time and focused on those 3 for a certain amount of time. So one example was if we divided each semester into halves and students took only 3 of their courses for the first 9 weeks. And then at the 9-week mark, they would then finish basically the first semester of those 3 courses. It would be a truncated timeline. Then they would take the remaining 3 classes on their schedule for the rest of the semester. And then at the semester changeover, students would again take the first 3 classes for 9 weeks, and then they'd finish out the year with their last 3 classes. So we looked at what that might look like. And then we also looked at if students only took 2 courses at a time. Similar model to the 9-week model, it's just a different timeline. There's 18 weeks roughly in a semester. So students would have focused only on 2 classes at one given time for 6 weeks, and then moved on to their next 2, and then their next 2, and then in the second semester, that same pattern would repeat itself. So we looked at a number of things, cohort sizes. We went out and measured what a secondary classroom would look like following the social distancing guidelines. If students had to be spaced at least 6 feet apart in every direction, how many students could we actually fit in a secondary classroom? And then we looked at the challenge of how do you evenly divide every class exactly in half? And we realized pretty quickly that that became more problematic. You could do it for 1 period or for the entire school and it would work. But the second students move from one class to another, now your division is off, or you might not have an even number of students in every class for each half of the alphabet. So it quickly becomes a little bit of a logistical nightmare. So we also entertained looking at cohorts of thirds. So if we took every class, maximum class size normally of 32, and divided it into thirds, we could, we could more easily divide students into even groups. And even if one of the cohorts was slightly larger, we would still have some wiggle room in the classroom to be able to fit everyone. So that's what we did behind the scenes. We've scheduled every student onto one of 3 cohorts behind the scenes, and students for the most part don't know that they're on a team. But if and when we're able to come back in person, if we end up going into cohorts of thirds, we already have that in place. The schedule that we looked at, it looks very similar to the distance learning schedule with longer periods. So in this case, students would come to school for 80-minute blocks, not 60-minute blocks. And this would push students into the afternoon after lunch. So we would have to provide for supervision between classes, provide for supervision at lunch, and provide lunch. as well as find ways to try to clean in between each period and get into each classroom and clean it, which may present an impossibility right there to be able to clean every classroom in 20 minutes. But we like the familiarity with our normal A and B schedule and similar to our distance learning schedule. And then there's still some time in the afternoon for our teacher office hours for individual student check-ins and help with their teacher. So let me try to explain this one real quick. This is an example of if students were divided into 3 cohorts, one cohort would come to school for both an A and a B day, while the other 2 cohorts would remain at home and participate for distance learning, through distance learning for those 2 days. So in this example, there's a cohort, we named it cohort X. So they would come to school for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd on an A day and 0 period if they have one. And then they would come back to school on that B day and go to 4th, 5th, and 6th, while the other 2 cohorts are participating at home. And then the next 2 days, the second cohort, the Y group, would then come for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd on the A day, and then 4th, 5th, and 6th on the B day, followed by that 3rd cohort, the Z group in this case, and then they would come for their 2 days. So this is just trying to visually show you what it would look like. So basically students in this model would come to school for 2 days and then be distance learning for 4 days. So kind of a 2-day on, 4-day off cycle. Students would, see their teacher in person once every cycle for each of their classes. And then, this model would continue on, right? This was just a 3-week sample. So some of the challenges now since we've developed this proposal, the more we learn and hear about the guidance on cohorting. So the California Department of Public Health has put out a number of pieces advocating for schools to plan, to maintain to the greatest extent possible, small cohorts that they can, as consistent as possible, to try to reduce cohort mixing, which would reduce your contacts, and to the best of our ability, minimize movement of cohorts. So at an elementary level, this is more doable. At a secondary level, this becomes problematic with the multiple classes and multiple teachers. So if you look back at our model here, our cohorts are roughly 1/3 of the entire school. So imagine Kenilworth, Petaluma Junior High, any of our secondary schools or high schools. Although you are in although you do come to school in person with only 1/3 of the total class, you're coming to school that day with 1/3 of the entire school. So in terms of cohorting, your cohort is roughly 1/3 of the school. As you change from one class to another, now those 2 smaller cohorts are mixing. And then as you go out for lunch or go out for break or then come back after lunch to your 3rd class, you're mixing yet again. So it's, this isn't the most conducive, model to the California Department of Public Health guidelines. So still more work to be done here as we look forward to returning in person. But that's an update to date. That schedule was the proposal that we shared with staff. It hasn't yet been adopted, and it may need to be adjusted even more. So I don't know if there's any questions on this so far.
I have a question, Cliff.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned something about it's not most conducive to the guidelines that the public health department has. Do they have any guidelines on schools? I know for churches or other places, it's max a certain number of people or a certain percentage. Have they said that for schools, you can have up to 1/3 or a certain number when you go back to hybrid?
Not that I've seen. Not that I've seen. They did, as you know, recently the state did put out some additional guidelines for bringing back small cohorts right now for kind of either small kind of group intervention or like what we're doing with our distance learning centers. And that's limited to a cohort of no more than 16, which includes adults and students. But that only applies right now to those kind of small groups and childcare and things like that. That's not a limitation necessarily on when we come back in person. But other than that, I haven't seen any actual like percentage or number like you're referring to.
I saw something that said 35 square feet per person. So I don't know how many square feet an average classroom is, but I would guess it's not 3,000.
No. I mean, if you can imagine a typical classroom, we could fit between 14 and 20, depending on furniture and cabinets and all that. Students spaced out on a 6x6 grid, with the teacher pinned up against the board at the front of the, not moving. But so if we packed a classroom like that, which is possible, anytime anybody moved, you'd be encroaching upon our 6-foot distance. So obviously, the smaller the cohort, the smaller the class size, the more physical room you have in the classroom. So other questions?
Cliff, I just have a quick question about the 80 minutes. Right now during distance learning, it's 60 minutes. And I was just wondering why it went up to 80, what the rationale was for that, and why they can't have like a similar distance learning schedule that they have now.
Yeah, so the idea behind that was, we're required to offer students in grades 4 through 12 a minimum of 240 instructional minutes every day. So the thought was, if we could maximize the time that we actually have students in person, that would be best, especially since they're only going to be coming every so often in this model. So two things. One, we maximize the teacher-student contact time in a day, plus we meet the minimum required minutes just with the schedule. Clearly teachers would assign homework and additional things to do, but we wouldn't be required to assign any additional work to meet our instructional minutes. We would have met them within this schedule.
Yeah.
So twofold.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Cliff, how did the committee in the summer go down the path of 3 courses at a time to any depth to sketch out what the daily schedule would look like in that circumstance? Would it be the same schedule, or would it look different?
So, right away, we started off with our same 6-period schedule from the get-go. It was familiar. That was the distance learning schedule we settled on pretty quickly as well. So we didn't stray too much from the 6-period schedule. We did spend at least one meeting or a couple meetings where we considered what other schedules might look like if we had fewer classes at one time. We looked at a number of variations, but the 3 classes, we looked at it a number of ways. That first example up top, well, that's the example. That's actually our model. So 3 classes a day, A day, B day, so you still have all 6. But we looked at a combination of these plus the cohorting. So the cohorting is what complicates this even more.
And that's what I was leading to, was in that middle model there, where 3 courses at a time for 9 weeks at a span. Does that ease cohorting or not? I mentally am having a hard time thinking about how that helps or exacerbates cohorting.
So if we were doing cohorts of thirds and we followed this same schedule, but every day it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for 9 weeks, and then 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. we would still have to figure out when does each cohort come to school. So even though they're only taking 3 classes, it might still look like this. It's just the same 3 classes. So instead of A days and B days, it would just be, you know, all A days for a certain amount of time. So instead of 2 on, 4 off, it would be 1 on, 2 off, 1 on, 2 off, 1 on, 2 off. So it just be, you just shorten this a little bit, but you still would have to come to school in thirds. So there would still be days where you're at home, distance learning, and some days at school in person, if we were doing the cohorts of the third.
But the mixing theoretically would be cut in potentially half, not quite half, but to the extent that in 6 periods they're mixing more, 3 periods they're mixing less. They're mixing less.
Right. So instead of mixing with a third of the school on the A day, and then potentially another third of the school on a B day, you're just mixing with the same 3 periods every day, right? So it is slightly less.
Thank you.
Cliff, I have a question. If it went to where it was just 3 classes, so every day was an A day, kind of, would they get enough, and it was for 6 weeks, would they get enough minutes within that class?
So we would still offer the minimum amount of minutes required this year every day.
Okay.
But in terms of a normal school year, I mean, it's, no matter what we do, it's going to be less minutes than it normally would. And it would be, you know, it'd be truncated. You would be basically doing a semester's worth of work in 9 weeks.
Or 6 weeks.
Well, I mean, depends. So if we were, yeah, or 6 weeks, depending on if you're doing 3 classes or 2 classes, right?
Thank you.
So more to be done on this one.
Any other questions for Cliff? Anything else, Cliff, before we move on?
Not on that one.
Okay, because I think you're on for the learning continuity and attendance plan as well.
That's right.
Okay, here we go.
All right, can everyone see this one? Am I still sharing? Okay, all right. So tonight, later on the agenda, you will be hopefully approving the 4 learning continuity plans for the district and the 3 charters, which are all the same plan, because it's all the same plan. We gave you an update at the last meeting, and we wanted to come back tonight and share with you a few things since the last update and now that the plan has been finalized. So the plan, the contents, if you recall, this plan, in place of an LCAP for this current year, the state put together this new plan, this new template called the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. And it is meant to address specifically how we are adjusting our instructional program during the pandemic. So they added a few new sections. It's definitely a shorter plan than the actual LCAP. I think our LCAP in prior years was 174 pages, and this is only 16. So this is just a small fraction of what an LCAP would normally be. And then the contents of the plan are, as you see here on the screen, these are all the major sections with some subsections in them. So in the first part of the plan, we just addressed, you know, how the pandemic has impacted our community and our schools. You know, it hit us like it did everyone else mid-March, right as we went into spring break. We decided to take an extra week after spring break to put together our plan and train teachers and jump into it. So we finished the year on what I've heard people call crisis learning. I kind of like that. And then we got into the mode of what are we going to do for the next school year, not knowing if it was going to be in person or not. So over the summer, we engaged staff, and you saw this last time. We engaged staff in a working group over the summer to kind of get their input and thoughts and ideas on if we had to do distance learning again. And again, at the time, we didn't know if that would happen. So we planned for what if we had to do distance learning again, what can we learn from what we just tried? How could we make it better? How could we make it more meaningful for both students and staff? How could we up our game, per se? So we worked with our groups over the summer, and then in August, the state came out with the template for this plan, and we started to engage the public in September. So we had a parent and public advisory group that met 5 times, along with our DLAC meeting to get to input and kind of consult and review the plan. And since the last board meeting, we had a final meeting with our advisory group, and we also reviewed the plan at our DLAC meeting on the 16th, and then we put together all of the input and feedback and finalized our plan. I'm happy to report that, you know, we had a pretty healthy group meeting with the advisory group. We had, you know, anywhere between, I don't know, 13 and 18 folks join us for the elementary and secondary meetings. And then we had 16 folks join us for the DLAC meeting on the 16th, which was really good. And all of our meetings, except for DLAC, was translated into Spanish. So DLAC, we kind of did the opposite. We did that one in Spanish and talked in English a little bit. The big takeaways from stakeholder input were, like you just saw, some thoughts that the secondary hybrid plan is untenable. A need to plan for the public safety power shutoffs. So what would we do in distance learning if there were no power? And then this was strongly shared a number of times, that not just student mental health and staff mental health, but we need to look for ways to provide social opportunities for kids, even and especially in distance learning. That we got to provide more opportunities for kids to see each other, to engage. So, you know, a strong suggestion to have our schools think outside the box to try to provide some of these opportunities. And then one of the other suggestions was partnering with a group called Primatores that help outreach to Spanish-speaking families. And then some of the endorsements, as we're calling them, the stakeholders, you know, supported our current instructional plans, which include our distance learning plan. Strong support for the distance learning centers that we've started and will be expanding. And then, agreeing with us that there definitely is a need to continue to address social emotional health. The next big section of the plan is what's called continuity of learning. So this is where we address both our distance learning and hybrid plans. And so you've seen these a few times. So this is the elementary hybrid plan, which divides the students into 2 cohorts, an AM group and a PM group. The secondary model that you just saw. Our distance learning centers, which we'll be expanding. These are mainly to assist students whose parents, either one or both parents work during the day and aren't able to necessarily support their students in getting online and completing their work, or families that work, or students who don't have reliable internet at home and our other options haven't been working. So it's a way for us to allow students to access our high-speed internet on campus, and we do have to follow cohorting guidelines. And unfortunately, we don't necessarily have the capacity to serve all of the needs that may arise, but we're going to try to do our best to meet as much of the need as possible. And then in that section of the plan, we have to detail the expenses. So you guys haven't seen this yet, unless you looked at the plan. So these are rough estimates of what we will spend in these areas. So for returning in person, for the distance learning centers, setting up our schools and our classrooms for PPE, we're going to spend about $400,000. And then there's other capital improvements, including, things like charcoal filters and other things to help support ventilation and buildings. And we had a rough estimate about $500,000 there. The next section of the plan gets into distance learning, and we address how we will provide access to devices and connectivity. Our distance learning model for elementary, this is what we're currently doing, and you're probably familiar with this. So again, our total number of minutes, it depends by grade, but we do that through a number of things, through live interaction, video conferencing, through small group, whole group, independent work. We can count all of that towards our instructional minutes requirements. In secondary, we follow this model, A-B schedule, 60-period classes for our total of 240. When you add in additional work that teachers are assigning for each class each day. We provided professional development a number of times since this has started, including in August when we had our annual 2 professional development days. We provided some other trainings with our assessments, and we provided a number of parent trainings for Parent Square, Seesaw, and Google Classroom. The plan asks that we address any staff whose role or responsibilities have been altered. So in our elementary model, in order to support some of our independent study interested students, we may be kind of refocusing how we use some of our certificated staff. We're taking an all hands on deck approach. This is an example of what the distance learning schedule looks like. So students are supported in the morning when they're online on their device, video conferencing with their classmates and their teachers. They're just at school when they do it. And then we provide lunch. And then there's independent work time. And then depending on the school and the situation, there are daycare offerings available for parents in the afternoon. So you can see this section of the plan is where we have done a number of things and spent the most money. So a lot of these are distance learning tools. So we upgraded to the enterprise edition of Zoom. We were using kind of the upgraded free upgrade in the spring. We purchased Seesaw for our TK through 3 portfolio and online conferencing. Over the summer, we increased our bandwidth district-wide, many times more than what we had before. We also changed our filtering software, our filtering licensing. And then since then, we've purchased a number of other tools for our teachers to use, including Edpuzzle, Kami, and then some others that we're going to be buying. To help students get access, we've upgraded a number of our devices. We went from iPads at the junior high level to Chromebooks over the summer. We've purchased a number of hotspots in conjunction with some grants and some rebates and some things the state's been doing to try to ensure that all of our kids have access. We are going to be refreshing our devices at the lower levels, our iPads. Some of these things you'll see on the consent agenda tonight. We provided PD, or we're going to be providing PD for those using iPads for our staff. We're going to be upgrading staff devices as well. And we did purchase updated digital curriculum, digital licenses for our 7th and 8th grade social studies curriculum. It was the one core curricular subject at the junior high level that we did not have digital access to. And so not only does this provide digital access, but this brings us into compliance with the most updated framework in the state. And then also we looked at buying additional teacher monitors so that teachers could they could, be sharing one screen on Zoom while seeing the kids on the other screen, so you can kind of see everything at the same time. The state also asked us to have a plan and focus on how we will assess for learning loss from the spring, over the summer, and during distance learning. And we're going to be doing this through a number of things. The expenses related to learning loss, a lot of these are assessment software programs. And then our distance learning centers also will help us with that. And there's some funding we're using from our after school ACES grant. And then under social emotional mental health, the plan asks what PD are we going to or have provided to staff. So you'll be familiar with the circle up trainings that we've embarked on with the train the trainer model. So that's one of the big PDs we're doing with staff. And then we have a number of things, including kind of a recently revived social emotional learning committee that Student Services that Liz is leading up. So they've so far done some assessments on what do we have in place to address social emotional health, and then kind of what else can we do, where else do we need to focus our efforts this year. The plan also asks for us to address how we are going to engage families and how we're going to outreach to students who are not participating on a daily basis. And one of the things we did over the summer is bought licenses to this communications platform, Parent Square, which allows us to send messages to families in a more uniform, consistent way. They can choose how to receive it. They can choose what language they want to receive it. On top of that, the state requires us to monitor daily participation, not just if, but how students participate, and then look back each week and verify which students have not participated in at least 60% of the days, and then to respond appropriately. So reach out to families, reach out to students, try to find out what things are in the way from them participating and try to resolve those. And then we had to address how are we providing meals for students during the pandemic. So this is our current model. And then the last section, this is probably the most important section. We are given supplemental funding from the state on top of our normal allocation that is meant to be principally directed towards serving what are called unduplicated students, which includes English learners, foster youth, and low-income students. So in our plan, we have to address specifically these groups. We can also do things that serve and help all students, but we have to show mathematically that we are increasing or improving services to these groups by a certain percentage. So the plan addresses that. It shows our percentage that we have to meet. And so you'll see this again. This is a piece that's taken from the LCAP where we total up the total number of dollars of the services that are specific to these groups. And we show how we are meeting or exceeding the required level. And just for your reference, the percentage of unduplicated students in each of our districts is right there, 41.03, 41.75 for the two districts. If we ever got up to 55%, that's when we would receive not only supplemental dollars, but concentration dollars. So we're kind of in that middle realm where we receive supplemental, but we don't receive concentration money. So, and that's just a quick summary. You have access to the PDF plans that have more details, but I don't know if there's any questions, comments from the board.
I just had one question.
Yeah.
It's more, I'm sure this is happening, but I will feel like an idiot if I don't ask it and then it didn't happen. So all the capital improvements where filters and different things are coming in, I'm assuming wildfires and all the smoke is being taken into account in picking those filters and whatnot.
Do you want me to answer this, Cliff?
Sure, yeah, jump in.
So that's
it's not quite a question.
That's a great question, and absolutely we're taking that into account. So we're actually looking at mobile units that we can push into classrooms that do ultraviolet and HEPA filtering, especially for our secondary, as we're trying to figure out how to scrub the air clean in a less toxic way than spraying chemicals to sanitize. So we're looking into things like that.
Awesome. Sweet. Thank you.
I have a question about the power shutoff days. What would we do if we were in school and there was no power? Wouldn't we just not have school that day?
That's a loaded question. It depends on how. It would depend on how close we are to meeting our instructional minutes for the day, the minimum number of minutes. So we had a water main at CASA a couple years ago go off. We had to shut off the water.
That was only 1 year ago. Man, it's been a long year.
Yeah. If we would have stayed in school, I think another 15 minutes, we would have met our minutes for the day. So it was one of those, but yeah, it's a good point. What happens if the power's off for the entire day? You know, we would do what we could, and we'd probably have to make a decision in conjunction with the site and the district on what would happen there. I was at a school in another district that had electronic toilets and urinals, and when the power was out, they don't flush. So, you know, we don't necessarily have that problem, but these are great questions.
And I would also say that PG&E is working at targeting the PSPS, the power shutoffs, in more targeted areas, so they're not turning off such a wide range of PG&E for like the entire town of Petaluma. So we would evaluate it kind of area by area and site by site, and we track that stuff.
I guess my concern would be if one of our campuses power is totally shut off and we send kids home and some have power and some don't, like, do we do distance learning? Do we not? I guess it would be up to the site admin and stuff, but that's just something I thought about.
So we've actually talked with our teachers union about that. The concern is, so on the one hand, you know, if you prepared some lessons that could be given at any time for that very circumstance, what if we needed to? I know there's some interest in doing that, but you know, on the district's part and on some sites and some teachers' part. But also in those situations, you'd be creating something that wouldn't necessarily even be within the scope or sequence of what you would be doing at that time. Like if you made 5 lessons right now, we may not even need them for months, or maybe it's a flood day in February or something. So there's that too. So do you create something that's just totally generic? And then for us to be able to count it as a school day, you know, we would have to ensure that students could do it, that they could have access to it, and it wouldn't require power at all. Right.
But,
so
didn't we take that into account in our calendar so that we have those extra days built in already?
Yeah, we're required to utilize those days before asking for a waiver.
Right.
But we built in 5 days.
Yeah, we have 5 days.
You know, PG&E is already estimated, you know, you can expect around 10 days a year. I keep on raising this issue because, you know, instructional time is coming at a premium now. I mean, in past years, we were only dealing with fires. And so, you know, if we lost a week there, as painful as that is, we were forgiven by the state in terms of ADA, and it was just lost time. Now, I don't think we can take that approach anymore, because we have built in lost time in this pandemic, and accepting more from expected power shutdowns is just too painful. But Cliff brings up the challenge: is how do you make a generic, or do you make a generic plan, and how does a teacher plan for what that instruction will be like, with presumably books and workbooks, no electronics essentially. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't want to just give up and say we're going to close school for power shutoffs.
Well, no, but there's just so much more to consider besides power shutoffs. I mean, there's fires, there's, we're living in a really crazy time. So how do we plan for that with distance learning, I guess, is my question.
Right. So that's exactly the question I'm asking. Yeah, is that we have to consider it. We can't throw our hands up in the air and just let it be.
Oh no, I realize that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh yes, so the last time we broached that with the union, it was, if I recall, the feeling, the preference was using those makeup days in person was more effective than a generically created random lesson that may not fit within what's going on at the time of a shutoff. So definitely something we could revisit and talk about. It doesn't hurt to have backup plans just in case.
I think we're going to need
but that's where we left that discussion. And then I just wanted to thank everyone who's been from March, whatever it was, 16th or something, when we went into spring break until now. It's been lots of folks involved in what school is going to look like. How can we improve? How can we up our game with our instruction? How can we be more on top of students' needs and their not only their instructional needs, but their social emotional needs, as well as staff. So we've been, in essence, this plan is literally just a documentation of everything that's been happening since March. So we had great participation this summer with a great working group, our advisory groups, the board study sessions, negotiations meetings. We just had a real great involvement, all hands on deck. Jason was a great help. He's a great facilitator. He hates when I say that because I don't know, because then he gets picked to facilitate meetings, but he did a great job working with our folks, and he's kept me in line. And if he were co-hosting right now, he would have made me be more succinct. So, but just thanks to everyone involved, and it's been, we've all been pulling as hard as we can, business, food services, facilities, classified, certificated, admin, everybody.
You also, we've also increased the meals that we're serving, yes? I got an email about that.
Yes, so the state came out and authorized summer seamless 7 days a week. So we are effective Monday going to start making breakfast and lunch available Mondays for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays pick up for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that will start on Monday.
Excellent.
And it will be at every campus except Petaluma High School. Petaluma High School, we could not get qualified for summer seamless, but we were able to qualify everybody else. And the number of meals there was quite low, at less than 6 a day. So
thank you. It's good. Any other comments, questions about the plan? Okay, we are moving on to comments from the public on non-agendized items. I have a blurb I need to read. Under Government Code Section 54954, members of the public have the right to address the governing board on any items of interest, providing it relates to the subject matter jurisdiction of the school district. While Government Code allows speakers to criticize the district's policies, procedures, programs, services, and/or employees, the district does have a policy specific to complaints against employees. Should comments from the public pertain to a specific district employee, The board requests that the complaint first be submitted in writing to the employee's immediate supervisor for investigation. If the comment is about something that is not on the agenda, it will be heard only during the public comment on non-agendized items period, which we are about to enter. Once that part of the meeting is over, comments will only be taken on agenda items during the discussion of those items. The board values public comments, and although we cannot take action or discuss items not on the agenda, we listen carefully, take notes, and appreciate input from the public. Public comments are subject to a 4-minute per person limit or a 20-minute limit per subject matter. In just a moment, we will open the chat. It will be open for about 2 minutes, and please include your full name and your topic.
The chat is open.
Thank you, Ashley.
So we've opened up the chat for the next 2 minutes. If you have a comment that you want to make, whether it is an agendized item or a non-agendized item, you will put your name in the chat box and list the item that you would like to speak to. We'll be responsible for organizing it. If it's an item that's on the agenda, we'll open up and you'll have your comment during that agendized item. So regardless of whether it's an agenda or a non-agenda item, this is the time for you to add your comment into the chat box. Okay, we'll give one more shout out there. If you want to put something in to speak to it, you've got about 10, 15 more seconds to include your item. All right, Ashley, you want to close the chat box?
It's closed.
Okay, so we have some upcoming items related to discussion information on logistics committee and distance learning. So that will cover Mike Webb's item, Jeff Ellis's item, and Jessica Umphris's item. So, Board President, you're going to want to open up to first Dulcie Moore and then Corey Johnson.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't see the name in the chat.
Yeah, Dulcie Moore.
Or Dulcie Moore, you're on.
Hi, I don't have much more to say than I wrote in the chat. Just a question about how kids with IEPs are being included in the improved services side of things.
Okay, and then Mike Webb. Mike Webb, is he?
Mike's item would be for later on. It would be Corey Johnson.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Corey Johnson. Thank you. Corey, are you there?
Oh, it's saying, hold on. I have to promote to panelists into allowed to allow to talk.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a Chromebook, so it becomes a little trickier. My name is Corey Johnson. I was a volunteer in Petaluma schools until mid-March, and I miss it greatly. Not sure when I will be able to get back, but I'm appreciative of the ongoing work of Petaluma City School staff and board. I'm in collaboration with local groups such as TIDE and NBOP to address the inequities of online learning, like the distance learning centers, and I thank you for that. And I am wondering if the inequity in the availability of a critical resource is also being addressed, and that would be books. So I'm seeing a lot about online, but I think students need books to hold, and books in the hands of all students and parents, books with diverse characters written by diverse authors, books on topics that engage and teach, books to be read to and or discussed with students online daily, and books to be held and cherished. I've collected a large library of new and used children's books and would like to be a part of putting more books in children's and parents' hands and expanding classroom libraries. And so my contact information, I was a volunteer, so is at the district office. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that is the end of public comment on non-agendized items. The next is the report on activities and correspondence of school board members, and we've been busy. Circle Up training to be a trainer, the ad hoc committee for reopening meetings, the SCO panel on student voices on social justice, race, and equity in the schools, meeting with PFT, CHIPA, Petaluma City Schools and Nonprofits meetings, the PEF Bash, yay, Chain of Hope, and the Learning Continuity Plan meetings, all on Zoom. Okay, now we are at the approval of consent agenda by consolidated motion. I need a motion and a second, please.
Move to approve. Move to approve.
A second.
Thank you, Joanna. So it's a pretty packed schedule. Are there any questions or comments on what is in the consolidated, in the consent agenda?
Yeah, I have two questions that should be short ones. I saw that we're getting rid of a Ford, I think it was an F-250, because it's old, and I think it's the year I was born, so yeah, old. But is there any way Auto Shop could use it? Like, are they ever considered when we're getting rid of old vehicles? That was just kind of the first thought that popped to my mind on that one.
Yes, once the board declares it surplus, we can definitely consider offering it to the auto shops. And just for you to know, we've made a policy that any vehicles older than Caitlin, we're gonna surplus. we thought once they hit 20.
I think that's a fair. Yeah, 93 is the cutoff, man. Come on. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I just wasn't sure where in the timeline, like offering it to Auto Shop would be. So thank you.
First, the board has to declare it surplus, and then we consider how to dispose of it.
Got it. Okay, that's awesome. That's kind of what I figured, but I thought I'd ask. And then my other question was for the cameras on buses. You know, I kind of have the same issues we brought up with cameras on campus. I think safety is super important, and so much stuff happens on buses, so much sexual harassment, so much bullying. So I totally understand the need and desire, but I guess I'm wondering how long footage would be stored. If it's all closed circuit, like how hackable is it? And then like, is there audio? So those are all nebulous kind of open-ended questions that are factors in whether or not I would like cameras on buses.
No, I appreciate that. Usually we don't store data for very long. I mean, David, I don't know what your recommendation would be, but it really, we've heard from parent interest in adding cameras to buses in large part because of student safety. And so, and everywhere I've worked, we've added those in the past, and they really do add a level of safety value that you can't really do in any other way. So anyway, but yes, those are good questions, and we can certainly report back on some of that stuff as we move forward.
About the audio that Caitlin mentioned, is there audio?
I don't think there's audio. I
No,
think cameras.
no, there can't be audio on it. It has video surveillance only.
Yeah.
I mean, we could set it. I mean, we could, typically speaking, that from my experience has been.
That's fine then. I mean, not fine. Like, yeah, because legally. Yeah.
It typically gets purged within a week.
Okay.
I got a question also.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Oh, sorry, Caitlin, were you done? If you're not, go ahead.
I want to make sure she was.
No, I'm done. Sorry, my internet keeps cutting in and out. So go for it.
Chris, item 10.2.6, the budget calendar. Really appreciate that. My question was, I know at the close of last academic year, we rustled up a committee that included some committed parents who were willing to take the hard task of looking at cuts. And then, the legislature bailed us out, and the committee, didn't have to meet as much as they thought they would. Can we rustle up that same group of parents, as well as anyone else who wants to join? But I just remember that those parents were, committed to tackling this hard issue of upcoming cuts.
I would say parents and students. We've already had one or more of the students on the committee already reach out for the dates for the committee. So yes, absolutely. Everybody who was part of the committee in May and June is going to be ongoing for this year. So we'll be reaching out to them. As soon as you approve this, then tomorrow we'll be sending out the dates to all the committee members so we can kind of get those on the calendar.
Thank you
for that calendar. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I have one quick question. I noticed that for all the Chromebooks and technology, they're going to be paid for by COVID funds.
Yes.
Is that what I saw? Is there enough?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of questions. Oh.
No, go for it. I was just going to say, any more questions?
On 10.2.7, the purchase of iPads for TK through 6, I was just wanted to know why iPads and not Chromebooks.
Hi, Maddie, I can speak to that. And there might be some teachers from the Learning Innovation Committee as well that we could pull into the conversation who are here, might be here. And so the variety of reasons, the Learning Innovation Committee is making that recommendation. For one, the iPad is the current device that is being used in grades TK through 6. And given the transition is going to be happening mid-year during potentially during distance learning, that guided some of the conversation in that trying to transition to a different device when there's already a competency and awareness, and in many cases, a significant level of proficiency with using the iPad for learning in those grade levels seemed like a huge challenge. And it was viewed as one more thing that we'd have to try to overcome during this already challenging time. So that was one factor. The survey data that we reviewed showed that the teachers in those grade spans preferred the iPad or the iPad with a keyboard if possible. And so in grades all the way down to second grade, we'll be having a keyboard case paired with the device. And so really you get the best of both worlds. You get the multimedia transformative learning experiences that an iPad can provide and the keyboarding that is needed, especially on the SPEC as they start doing that in grade 3. And then the price points between the two devices was another consideration. Those the margins are shrinking between them to some degree. was another factor that was looked at. And there's been some significant supply chain issues with the Chromebooks over the last 6 months, given some shortages with the chips that they use to make them. And so many school districts have been without devices who have been awaiting Chromebook orders that they submitted in last June, May even. And so we also know that the Apple devices are more readily available. And so those were all of the factors that came into that decision and recommendation.
Thank you. Perfect. The only other thing thank you, David. That was great. I was just thinking, the reason I asked was just because of the, we have Chromebooks for 7 through 12. So I was just wondering, but it makes total sense. The only other thing I was wondering about was the Mentor Me contract, which sounds awesome. And I was just, it sounded like it's an expansion of the Mentor Me services. And so am I correct that the participants in the program do not have to be a mentee with a mentor?
So right now during our current restrictions, no, there's gonna be no meeting in person. But this is kind of a renewal of a service that we worked with them on last year. So last year with our CSI grant, they helped partner with us to do a suspension diversion for students who were being suspended or would have been suspended for drug offenses. And then this year we changed it to not just drug offenses, but any suspension.
Okay. Okay.
So that's,
Great.
those are the differences.
Okay, but it is a program that you've actually used before with Mentor Me. And but
Yeah.
the difference is what it covers, kind of.
Right. So,
Okay.
so this was the site with their allocated CSI funds determined this was, something that they felt would address their root cause for their high suspensions. And they liked it. They had a fraction of the normal suspensions they do last year. But the school, they're the ones that determined they wanted to broaden the scope, not just drug-related suspensions, but any suspension.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sounds like a great program.
Yeah, it really does.
Anything else before we vote? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, action items. Resolution 2021-07 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary and Joint Union High School Districts honoring the contributions of administrators to quality education and declaring the week of October 11th through 17th as Week of the School Administrator.
To go through the resolution with everybody, and I know our administrators are hard at work this year, certainly every year, but especially this year.
I'll say.
Whereas leadership matters for California's public education system and the more than 6 million students it serves, and whereas school administrators are passionate, lifelong learners who believe in the value of quality public education, whereas the title school administrator is a broad term used to define many education leadership posts: superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals, special education and adult education leaders, curriculum instruction leaders, school business officials, classified educational leaders, and other school district employees are considered administrators. Whereas providing quality service for student success is paramount for the profession. Whereas most school administrators began their careers as teachers, the average administrator has served in public education for more than a decade. Most of California's superintendents have served in education for more than 20 years. Such experience is beneficial in their work to effectively and efficiently lead public education and improve student achievement. Whereas public schools operate with lean management systems, across the nation, public schools employ fewer managers and supervisors than most public and private sector industries. Whereas school leaders depend on a network of support from school communities, fellow administrators, teachers, parents, students, businesses, community members, board trustees, colleges and universities, community and faith-based organizations, elected officials, and district and county staff and resources to promote ongoing student achievement and school success. Whereas research shows great schools are led by great principals and great districts are led by great superintendents. These site leaders are supported by extensive administrative networks throughout the state. whereas the state of California has designated the second full week in the month of October of each year as Week of the School Administrator in Education Code 44015.1, whereas the future of California's public education system depends upon the quality of its leadership. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary School District and the Petaluma Joint Union High School Districts hereby proclaims the week of October 11th through the 17th as Week of the School Administrator, commending all school leaders for the contributions they make to successful student achievement.
Thank you, Matthew. Do I have a motion? Maddie?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the resolution.
And do I have a second? Maddie, was that a second?
Yeah, but Caitlin did. I was muted.
Okay. Do we want anything to say before we vote?
Thank you.
Yes. And
Thank you. Thank you. I know you guys have really worked really hard, and I really appreciate it. It's helped us understand, along with everybody's, everybody's input, but you guys directing it and focusing it has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, agreed. This is such a challenging time to be doing this work in any situation. And I just applaud all of you for your dedication to our students.
absolutely. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Did I hear a opposed? Or was that just a delay?
I think it just came in delayed.
Probably a delay.
Okay, thanks, Caitlin. Okay, moving on to Ed Services. Resolution 2021-08 of the Board of Education to fully comply with the requirements of Education Section Code 60119 through 60252 regarding sufficiency of textbooks or instructional materials for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion to move that in?
I so move.
I'll second.
We talked about this already, about being Fair Act compliant, yes?
Well, so that, I mean, that's a piece of it, but this is every year as part of the Williams process. By the 8th week of the school year, we have to, the board has to resolve that our students have access to their instructional materials or textbooks in our core subjects, plus foreign language and lab supplies. So every year we scramble right over the summer to make sure, due to the ebbs and flows of grades and classes, that we have enough instructional materials for everyone. It was a little complicated this summer. One of our vendors sent us the wrong quantities of the wrong order. So we're scrambling to get those things back to them and get the right ones to us. And then we did obviously adopt K-8 science. So making sure we got all the right materials there. So as soon as the school year starts, we work with the sites to make sure if there are any gaps, if there's any holes, that we fill them as soon as possible. And that's what this resolution is saying, that we have filled those holes, or if there are any holes that are still existing, the orders are being processed and we're waiting on those materials. So
How does distance learning affect or have an impact on those materials? I mean, do kids have books?
So instructional materials can be digital access to the curriculum or hard copy. And when we purchase curriculum, starting back when we adopted math and then English and then now science and then social studies for a few grades, we always make sure we have enough digital licenses for every student. In some cases, we get a digital license and a hard copy, but in most cases, we purchase 15 hard copies per teacher per course, just in case there's technical issues or the Chromebook or the iPad's down. And so we still have that in place. And from time to time, we do distribute the hard copies out to students if need be. But the digital access does suffice and does meet the requirement. So.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Cliff. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, let's see. We are now on 2020-21 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, Petaluma City Schools, the LCP.
Wait, I think you missed.
We didn't
There should have
do-
been a Williams resolution for both districts.
What did I? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That's right.
11.2.2.
My bad. 2021-09 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma Joint Union High School District to fully comply with the requirements of Ed Section Code 60119 through 60252 regarding sufficiency of textbooks or instructional materials for the 2020-2021 school year. Sorry about that. Got ahead of myself. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for Petaluma City Schools. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Second?
I'll second. I'll second.
Questions, comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for Pengrove Elementary.
I'll move to approve the plan.
Second?
I second.
Questions, comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for Mary Collins Charter School at Cherry Valley. Do I have a motion?
I'll
I'll
move.
move to approve.
Second?
I will second.
Questions, comment? Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll take this moment just to echo what Cliff said earlier and thank the dozen to dozen and a half people who committed themselves from the public to engage and provide us input on these plans. It is an important step, and so I want to acknowledge and thank them.
Yes, community participation is vital. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and finally, 2020-21 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for PACS, Petaluma Accelerated Charter School.
I'll move to approve the plan.
Second?
Aye.
Questions, comments?
Second, aye. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. On to discussion information only. Ad hoc school reopening logistics committee and distance learning enhancements.
So this is, I believe, the item where the questions fall under related to the chat. Can you see the chat, Ellen?
Yes, I can see some of it.
So you have Jeff Ellis, then followed by Mike Webb,
And
and Jessica.
Okay, so Jeff Ellis, please, you're on.
Hello.
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 Hi there. Want to thank everybody, all the teachers and the staff, of course, and the volunteers on the board. I know it's a volunteer job, so thank you for all the time you've been putting in. And Cliff, thank you for that information. That was very useful to kind of see on paper the different plans that could come together, and it gives me a lot of confidence that the logistics are doable, and that there's plenty of brain power between everybody that worked on it all summer and everybody that's working on it now with between the teachers, the board, and the district, that the logistics of it can come together relatively quickly. The piece that I haven't seen and would love to see is the vision of the timing of when it needs to happen, in the same way that kind of every other facet of our society now, from the restaurants, know that when we get into the red zone, they can be 25% open. The bars are never opening for a long time. Just every area of our society seems to know what the parameters are under which they'll be able to open, except for the schools. So some concrete commitment to whatever it is. When it turns red, we're bringing in the special needs kids. 3 weeks later, we're bringing in grades 1 through 3. So that vision from the top that really puts a plan in place, and so that gives the people that are planning it, like Cliff and others, a plan from which to work. At this point, it seems like there's kind of they're planning on hypotheticals, which is really difficult. And I think having that vision and leadership from the top and a really concrete plan, and obviously that can change super quickly. You might get a weekend and the special needs people come back and the rest of the schedule gets kicked back a week. But if you're working from something like that where everybody knows, and I think the kids, teachers, staff, everybody deserves that level of information and transparency to really understand the timing and requirements under which now that the state sort of set some guidelines in place on who can do what when, how we're going to align with that. And maybe the belief is that until there's 0 COVID cases, no one's going back. But if that's the case, then we should know that too. So I think it's important at this point for the board to kind of establish and document that level of vision so that we can, that everybody can kind of plan off of that and have some idea of when different things might happen and kind of in what order and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I would ask for kind of moving forward in the relatively near future, because I know we're getting into October, and I know the next, everybody knows everybody's not going back at the beginning of November. I know that's the next date, but whenever in October that decision's made of when that stuff is going to happen, I think having a clear vision on that is something that the community deserves. And I think it would really help everybody that's doing all the work to make it happen, which is difficult work, to work in kind of a more efficient and under a clear vision that's important for any organization. So that's about all I have, and I really appreciate again everybody's hard work, and hopefully we're going to see some progress on this thing so that we can start moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Mike Webb. I believe you wanted to talk about, you had some questions about children with underlying conditions. Mr. Webb, are you still with us? Why don't we move to Jessica? Oh, are you there, Mr. Webb?
We're trying to unmute.
I think maybe he might be under Kunavir now.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was on mute. So yeah, my question is, as you start bringing students back into school and stuff, what is the plan to ensure the safety and health of our children that have underlying medical conditions that are otherwise more vulnerable or immunocompromised? With the risk of this, contracting this virus and otherwise having more severe impact to them than other children that don't have those conditions.
Sure. Thank you. And then Jessica, first, did I say that correctly? Jessica?
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Yeah, you said it correctly. Thank you. I have been following the news. I have kids in the district, and I've been following the news. I saw last week that the state announced that districts will be responsible for all COVID testing and tracing, and that forced Santa Rosa to vote to stay in distance learning a lot longer than they had hoped. And I have all the empathy in the world for you all that this insane curveball has been thrown at us. I had no anticipation that this was going to be a requirement the state passed on to the schools. I'm sort of in shock that they would expect us to do this. And I'm just wondering what the plan is for PCS, and also I just can't imagine the cost of this endeavor and how it will affect the downstream items of trying to get kids back in schools and what it will do for the timeline of getting them back there. So I just, wanted to express a lot of empathy, a lot of sympathy, and a lot of dismay that this requirement is coming our way. And if anybody had any thoughts about that, I would love to hear them. That's all. Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and that's something we have to look at. Access to testing with a quick turnaround, contact tracing. What kind of schools are being placed into the medical field, sort of. So thank you for bringing that up.
So I'm gonna provide a little bit of an update, and also have Cabinet also jump in a little bit regarding the ad hoc school reopening logistics committee and some of the things that we've been discussing as we have been continuing to receive new information related to schools and reopening of schools. We have two board members on the ad hoc committee. Currently it's Ellen Webster, Sheldon Jen, Maddie Cloud made the first meeting. And at our first meeting on September 10th, we reviewed the purpose of the committee, which was to advise the district on matters related to the transition from distance learning to hybrid. And look at our transition plans and any issues and challenges. And this would be an opportunity for us to have a discussion about what those issues and challenges are. The committee serves as an advisory group for the district as the district strives to make a decision about what are the best next steps forward instructionally. So as I mentioned, it was about 45 members strong throughout the community: board member, superintendent, chief business official, assistant superintendents, directors, Petaluma Federation of Teachers, California School Employees Association, South County Consortium. We have a number of elementary teachers, secondary teachers, counselor, school nurse, custodian, secretaries, and then parents, secondary parents, elementary parents, and we have some students as well. And lastly, but not least, community members. And so at our first meeting on the 10th, we focused on elementary and specifically went over the instructional plan from educational services. And that was what the board saw at our last board meeting. You saw some of the very specific instructional plan, what it could look like under a hybrid model. We also discussed, and we'll get into a little bit more in a moment, logistical challenges related to elementary. And then discussed what our next steps were going to be. And what we were looking at as far as next steps for the district was to look at this micro cohort model, that childcare providers fit under, and looking at bringing students back, targeted students that need additional support in distance learning, particularly at the elementary level, with a focus initially on grades 1 and 2, and getting that implemented with a gradual idea of expanding out that cohort model of support. At the second meeting that we had on the 17th, a week later, we followed the same process. We looked at the instructional plan for secondary, which the board had an opportunity to go through with Cliff tonight. We talked about some logistical challenges. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. And then we looked at what were some of our next steps, looking at cohort instructional support. Then we talked a little bit at that meeting regarding school reopening options. And let me share my screen. Can you guys see this okay? Thumbs up if you can. Okay. Move myself out of the way here. This is the chart that California Department of Health and Governor Newsom came up with related to school reopening plans. And currently, the county is in purple, in the purple tier. And in the purple tier, there are no waivers that are available for secondary or for grades 7 through 12. You can only submit for a waiver in grades kinder through 6th grade. The waiver, the state designed the waiver very specifically. That is not the default. The default under California Department of Health guidance is for students to be in distance learning. However, they did create a loophole called the waiver that essentially sets a bar for districts to say, if you think that you can do this safely, you're going to have to follow some very specific steps and show, in our case, Sonoma County Public Health, that you can reopen instruction safely and can meet all of the requirements listed under the waiver guidance. That is where we found out just recently that, as our previous speaker, parent speaker shared, that the state had passed the requirement of cohort tracing and testing to school districts. And that is one of the requirements necessary to meet to be able to, we'll talk a little bit more about that in some detail, to meet the waiver for elementary. There's also an acknowledgement that we have students that have special needs, whether they're students with disabilities, English learners, homeless youth, foster youth, and students that just simply are struggling in distance learning. That they created a pathway for students to receive some additional support. They call it the small cohorts exemption. That does not require approval from the Department of Health. And that's what our elementary cohorts that we're looking at rolling out for the beginning of October is under the small cohorts exemption. When districts move by county into the red tier, that is where schools may reopen for in-person instruction. But they have to have been in the red tier for at least 2 weeks. And the red tier is defined the second highest risk level, and it's all about positivity rates. In those particular situations, if a school decided, a district, to move forward with hybrid reopening, they would have to meet the guidelines that are listed right there on the right-hand side. In addition, it does not require approval from Sonoma County Department of Health. It's a local school board decision. And then, of course, in the orange tier is the more traditional reopening with what they call modified cohorts to reopen. They define a modified cohort as reduced social distancing between students. When you're looking at the red tier, you're looking at a minimum of 6 feet of distance between students and teachers. In a modified cohort, you might see even more reduced distancing. And so we kind of walked through this particular document, but really spent a good portion of our time talking about what the challenges were, specifically for the district moving from tier to tier, particularly coming into the purple tier, because we had a number of unanticipated challenges with staffing to roll out the small cohorts exemption. And so what I'm going to ask departments to do, and we'll start first with human resources, then we'll go to business, and then we'll go to student services, and then we'll move to ed services, is to just kind of briefly share some of the challenges that we have moving forward beyond distance learning. by department?
Sure. So I think thinking about this through the lens of human resources, when we think about our staff and supporting our staff, throughout over the course of the last couple of months, I've had probably close to 80, maybe 100 one-on-one meetings with our employees to discuss concerns about coming back to school. We all know this, we see it in the news. There's a lot of anxiety out there around returning to in-person instruction. So from that HR lens, my concern really is about adequately providing the necessary staff to have a safe environment for all of our students and staff. I'm not trying to just highlight the challenges, but this is a challenge. It's not something that we can't overcome, but it's certainly a challenge at this point, given what's going on. So for an example, so we recently agreed to a memorandum of understanding with CSEA to begin providing some small in-person support cohorts. So we're talking up to 12 students per cohort to really support students who are struggling with the distance learning platform, primarily looking at the 1st through 3rd grade level, much as exactly what Gary was just describing. So through that process, I'll be meeting with every employee who's been identified to support the program, and I'm anticipating that many will choose, many, I'm not sure exactly how many, but I know that there will be a group who will choose to take a leave over returning to in-person support. So depending on when we return in-person teaching and learning, I'm anticipating a similar trend with our teaching staff. That would be that's from the HR lens there.
And business?
Under business services, we have taken a very close look at all of our campuses and have been working hard to try to identify how are we going to make sure that all of our systems are working at a level that can address COVID-19. You heard me earlier mention we are actually looking into how do we ensure we have good air exchanges X number of times a day, looking at different types of equipment. And then part of the challenge is actually getting the equipment. I think you heard David Fischera talk about just trying to get our hands on Chromebooks. We were super fortunate that we ordered Chromebooks early for the 7-8 program back in March, April, and we're able to get them here before the start of school. I think it was like within a day of school starting. And then just how do we clean our classrooms effectively? How do we make sure that we're able to get in and clean classrooms while not disturbing students and teachers, while not leaving a chemical smell that bothers people? We have lots of people with high sensitivity to various chemicals, trying to find a way to sanitize our classrooms and other spaces in a way that people feel comfortable with. Not only did we do a good job sanitizing the space, but what is the unintended consequence or impact on staff and students? For example, we heard from one classroom that as we were going through sanitizing, the moisture was actually starting to curl up paper on books and so on and so forth. So we're just trying to dial in how do we sanitize in such a way that we can do it quickly, efficiently, in a way that teachers feel comfortable with and other staff, and that students and families feel good about. So that is a huge challenge. And the challenges are different elementary, junior high, and high school. And then just making sure that we can clean and sanitize all of our common spaces. We've purchased equipment, electrostatic sprayers, so that we can sanitize things like play structures and coordinate how do we keep kids off of play structures at any given time so that they're not mixing cohorts and touching surfaces before we have an ability to sanitize. Trying to figure out how to do restrooms, just doing the small cohorts at McDowell, trying to figure out how do we do restroom space? How do we separate and make sure that we can sanitize a restroom in between cohorts and identify, do we have enough restrooms to address those cohorts so that they're not going in and using a contaminated space from a different cohort. Transportation, there's lots of challenges in transportation about how do we effectively set up cost-effective and safe routes, given the challenges across our feeder districts and Petaluma City Schools. What will the small cohorts look like? how often do we run buses? How close can students sit? We've actually been exploring, can you get plastic dividers so that you kind of create more safety between the seats? Food service, we're working through a lot of the mechanics of food service. We can't offer speed lines, so we cannot offer community salad bars, what's coming known as a salad bar. We have to have them in individually packaged containers. How do you do that, and how are you able to offer really healthy and inviting food while still making sure it's safe? So those are just some of the challenges that we've run into.
Did you say, Chris, that logistically, one of the, it sounded like from our conversation that we had before that one of the biggest hurdles was the secondary schedule for cleaning?
Yeah, the secondary schedule as it was designed originally or over the spring, it's almost impossible for us to get in 20 minutes and clean every classroom. I mean, if you think about Casa Grande High School and Petaluma High School, we have probably 100 spaces that we would have to get in and clean. And even with these good electrostatic sprayers, you know, you kind of need 20 minutes to clean and have the residue dissipate enough that someone feels comfortable being back in the classroom. So that's a big question. We've looked at, you know, in the committee, there was lots of suggestions like, can we have others clean classrooms? Like, can we have a teacher clean their own classroom? Can we have students clean classrooms? Many of these things raise issues with health and safety standards and whether or not we're actually able to do that. But, you know, the elementary schedule of having an AM PM model where we have an hour and a half to get in each classroom, that's certainly a much more viable type of schedule where we can actually get in and clean classrooms and have adequate time for, again, that classroom to not have that chemical smell, for teachers to feel comfortable coming back in.
Student services?
Yes, so I think I've talked a little bit before just about the plans around how we're going to get students into the schools in general. So some of the things that we're figuring out and working through are just drop-off schedules so that they're staggered so that we don't have a lot of traffic, because parents are going to need to wait while their students wait in line 6 feet apart, get their temp taken, and make sure that they've done their pre-assessment form showing that they're not showing any of the symptoms prior to coming to school. And it's also a matter of figuring out, are we going to be doing those forms on paper? Are we going to be doing them electronically? And if electronically, how is that going to work between staff and families? Also, just who's monitoring those lines. Matthew talked a little bit about staffing. So we know that teachers are going to be in the rooms waiting to bring the students in. And so who's outside actually taking care of all the drop off and the traffic management and the health forms and the temp taking and the hand washing that needs to take place all before the students actually enter the classroom area. Another thing that we're looking at is when students need to meet, say, with a counselor one-on-one, or, you know, anything else where they have to meet with an individual one-on-one. What do those offices look like? How are they set up so that it's safe for those one-on-one meetings? There's still some distance, but also how do we make it safe if students are rotating in and it's not always the same student sitting in that office? Is that something that we're going to be able to do, is the question. And then finally, it came up during our public comment, you know, the big new thing is really just looking at contact tracing and having the resources to do that within the district and the people to do that within the district, because there's so much communication and sort of back tracing that goes on in order to get that done. It's a really time consuming thing and a really important thing to make sure we're connecting with all the families. So definitely going to need to figure that out in pretty quick order, along with, you know, any possible testing that we may be doing for students and what that could look like.
And Gary, may I add just a couple other things that are, I think, important, and that is just getting PPE. So for example, today, we need more gloves, and so disposable gloves. And so we were racing around because all of our normal vendors, oh yeah, it's 6 weeks out, it's 8 weeks out, everything's back ordered. Getting our hands on PPE, you know, is becoming more and more challenging at the volume at which that we have to purchase it. and we're not even gearing up for school. So things like hand sanitizer, being able to get adequate hand sanitizer in a timely manner, making sure our containers are filled constantly. And again, we don't even have school in person, and we're still having some challenges. So just being able to order an adequate amount of PPE and making sure we can get it here in time has been challenging.
Ed services.
Hey, I'm gonna start with the elementary stuff, and then Cliff is gonna talk about the secondary stuff. So when we go to in-person for the elementary, there are some things that are actually that are really solid and aren't a challenge. For example, the cohorting in elementary is very reasonable. The schedule seems very, Chris just mentioned about the cleaning, but also just educationally, like the schedule is at least as good, if not better, than the schedule for distance learning. So there's some positive things around the in-person, but the things that we're seeing are really going to be challenges are all the details that at first glance you might not think about, like simple things like managing kids using just a few bathrooms and having kids go, like how do you get elementary kids to use bathrooms, to line up for things and do eating and breaks and still maintain social distancing. When we saw in our distance learning centers, when we first started trying to line kids up, what a challenge the simple things could be. The other, I think the biggest challenge overall will be, we want to be able to provide, when we go back in person, to provide some families also a distance learning option. We've been saying that from the beginning, that we want families to have the option that felt comfortable for them. And I do see that at the elementary that will be a challenge that we're going to need to figure out. How do we offer both in-person and distance learning and have there not be an educational drop-off on either of those models? How do we still give enough of the learning support that we need to and manage both models?
Yeah, and then for secondary, some of these things I shared earlier, but just taking a better look at the cohorting and trying to follow the guidance with as small of a cohort as possible, less movement, less mixing. The challenges related to providing potentially concurrent instruction, students, the cohorts that are in person, while also teaching the cohorts that are at home. So if we want to potentially do that simultaneously all at one time, just the challenges of running a Zoom and teaching the kids at home while also teaching the kids in person and supervising all of that at the same time. Or if not, carving out some time in the schedule for teachers to not only teach the kids in person, but then also teach the kids at home. So that, that potentially, depending on what that looks like, could be a challenge. You might be teaching everything twice every day, once to the kids in person, once to the kids at home, or potentially that concurrent model where you're trying to do both at the same time. And if so, just how do you ensure that you're giving your best to students, both in person and at home, and being able to manage that successfully. And then those are kind of the big ones. And I've obviously taken another look at our proposed hybrid schedule.
The in any movement towards a hybrid model would still mean that there will be a portion of our students that are and families that are electing to continue in a distance learning model. So we'd have to be able to allow those things to fit seamlessly, which can be a bit challenging because every family situation is different. Regarding students that are immunocompromised, I think there's a decision that families are going to have to make on whether they would want to place a student right back into this type of a situation, or whether they would want to take more of a wait and see approach. I mean, we can't give an opinion one way or the other. I would recommend they speak with their general physician or child's pediatrician, and we certainly will have the specifics related to the schedule and what it looks like and the level of cohort mixing, and be able to provide that if we decided to move forward with a particular hybrid plan. I think for us right now, the overarching issue that we were not prepared for was the contact tracing piece, that we would have to train people and have a cadre of staff that's what they would handle as part of their assignment, is doing contact tracing, and the testing piece. And because in that testing piece, many we are obligated under this, if we move forward with either waiver or move into coming back for assessments, we have to provide 2 weeks. We have every 2 weeks, 25% of our employees would need to be tested. And so we would have to come up with a schedule for that. There's a lot of information that we don't know yet, which is equally concerning. We've asked for it was not only Petaluma, but Sonoma Valley, Santa Rosa, Windsor. We all have asked for Sonoma County Department of Health and for the Sonoma County Office of Education to provide us some guidance on testing and some testing specifics, because we have not been provided any. We've got a specific set of questions that we need to get answers to regarding everything from reputable labs to reasonable cost estimates tied into this, to specifics related to when do you test somebody beyond the antigen screen and start looking at doing a confirmatory nucleic acid test for employees or for students. And so there's a lot of information that we still need to be able to gather, because we know that our expectation is going to be that we couldn't make a recommendation to return unless we can see at least a 24-hour turnaround in a testing assessment. We have to be able to have that. Part of our challenges, and I've shared this before in committee, I shared it with the ad hoc committee, I've shared it before at a board meeting, and I can give you some specifics to it, is related to the specific scenario that we have faced already as a school district, when we've had to make determinations related to employees that have come up symptomatic, that have had close contact for long periods of time with other employees, and we have sent them to get tested. Our initial concern obviously was the testing cycle was taking us 8 days to get back test reports. And the impact of that was significant. But more specifically, what do you do in that situation for the employees that have been in close contact? Do they go into quarantine? Do they not? And extrapolating that to students now and looking at, let me share a document with you. I am sharing a document with you. Let me just change my document. This is from the California Department of Health. And so I want you to put it in perspective of a family, a parent, and whatever we do has to pass the straight face test, not only in health and safety, but in reasonableness. And so if we have somebody, let's say it's our teacher, and they come to school and maybe they're not feeling very well and they have symptoms, and we send them home, we recommend them to be tested. The specifics of the testing we have to dial in. The directives from the California Department of Health is the school and classroom remains open. We also have confidentiality requirements that we have to meet, so we can't be telling people that somebody's getting tested for COVID. Okay? If we don't get back a result in a reasonable amount of time, those classes are continuing because those classes do not get quarantined at that moment in time. Those classes are continuing. And in the scenario that we had over the summer with non-classroom employees, had it been multiple days, and then later to find out that the employee tested positive, the first thing our parents are going to ask is going to be something to the effect of, how long have you known? And why wasn't I made aware of it? And as a case of our speaker, my son or daughter is immunocompromised. Why wasn't I made aware of that? And so as you go through the screening guidelines, there's some gaps in this when it comes to schools. This thing is not really designed quite in the same way as it should for schools. As it was initially set up, this guidelines were for businesses, not for schools. And they have modified it since. But it's not until you get down to confirmed cases where you really are starting to move on some things and looking at identifying contacts, quarantining, and excluding exposed contacts. It's that initial symptom state that is creating some anxiety and some nervousness about what to do, because we cannot be opening up school and then turn around and close down school and be opening and closing and doing this back and forth piece. And so we're going to need to be able to work out what exactly are if we were to move forward, what exactly will be our protocols above and beyond what the Department of Public Health provides us. So those are all the items that we talked about. The items that were shared by Cabinet were the same items that we shared. We're going to continue to discuss them at our next ad hoc committee meeting. And we'll have 2 board members there taking notes and helping to hopefully get some clarity on what those next steps are. The board has committed in a resolution to come back to the next board meeting to review what the next steps will be beyond week 12. And we'll be able to share a little bit more information with the board at that time. But I know the board will have a robust discussion about that. Any questions that I can answer at this time?
Not a question, Gary, but I would like to just share with my fellow board members what I heard, as a member of the board at these meetings. Is this the right time for that, Gary?
Yeah.
So, I've been a part of both the logistics, the reopening logistics committee. I attended the high school meeting, and then I went back and listened to the tape recording of the primary one. And then I've also been on the learning continuity plan meeting and attended all of those meetings as well. And I'm hearing remarkably similar perspectives across all these meetings and all stakeholder groups in all these meetings. And it's this. Thank you for taking the hard work of thinking through how logistics could work in a reopening. And what we're hearing is it's a monumental task. It's going to require a lot of reorganization of labor. And even when it's fully functioning, it's going to be fragile in the sense that when somebody gets COVID, because it will happen, it could jeopardize a lot of the what we've set up. And what I've been hearing from parent groups and from others, and even from staff and the faculty, is we have to weigh the pros and cons of this versus what is right now the status quo of distance learning. And what I'm hearing is 2 different opinions. One that has to do with education and our students' learning, and one that has to do with social development of our students. And on the educational side, I think there's kind of broad recognition that we might be better off in distance learning. We get more contact time, face time with our instructors, students can, because it's daily and it's for a certain amount of time versus the hybrid model. You're going to split each classroom into smaller cohorts. And so that live time with an instructor is also reduced by that much. And then on top of that, just all the labor and equipment and resources devoted to running a hybrid model is intense. It's very intense. And as an instructor, I know that my preferred focus is to teach and focus on my students and focus on my curriculum, and less about the logistics of how I'm operating. And so that speaks to the advantage from an educational perspective of distance learning. But what I'm also hearing from a lot of folks is school isn't just about academics, it's also about social development. And what the hybrid model is supposed to bring as an advantage is an opportunity for kids to interact in person with their teachers and with their classmates. And I'm not convinced that from an educational perspective, it's worth it, but I would love to see ideas about how we can enhance the social opportunities of our kids outside of academics. And I know in our learning continuity plan, and I appreciate that Cliff and Jason punched this out in our learning continuity plans, and they said, there was a lot of support from the community saying we need to think of creative ways of providing social opportunities for our kids. And so I'm just at this point just conveying to my fellow board members what I heard in all these meetings, and it was this dichotomy. Educationally, looks like distance learning might be the way to go. Socially, we have to think of creative options to enhance that.
And I was also on that committee, and one thing I really appreciated was there was a lot of thinking outside the box in a way of providing that social emotional contact, meeting with a class once a week or having club meetings on campus. So those are things that we are looking at, because I agree with Sheldon that nobody wants whiplash. We don't want to open school and then have to shut school, and then one group of kids is quarantined and another group of kids is going to school, and that's crazy. And you're right, if you're worrying about logistics, you're not really being able to teach. So that's what I noticed from the ad hoc committee, and what I'm conveying to our board members is that we have to get creative in ways that we can provide that social, emotional component of school. And so that's what we're looking at.
Sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. The question that was brought up by Trustee Jen, how can we enhance the social opportunities for our students, will be a question that we are going to bring back to the committee for some discussion at our next session.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering if we've learned anything about the success or challenges of these cohorts with our distance learning centers that we have established so far. I mean, what kinds of things have we learned that we could maybe apply to reopening?
It's still a little bit too small.
Okay.
What we've learned is that maneuvering just a few employees around was a monumental task.
Yeah.
Monumental, because we had a significant percentage of the employees that chose to not participate and go out, whether that's on leave or whatever other avenues that they have. So extrapolating that out is a bit daunting, but that's the one piece that's come out of it. I think we've learned that masking is not something to be afraid of. I think when we first first, I mean, back in April, when we were looking at the regulations on to mask or not to mask, that was a wow, you know, how can kids do that? You know, it just seemed like such a foreign thing. You know, seeing our students that are in the small cohorts and seeing other younger children, which you would seemingly be more difficult in small nursery school types of settings, pre you know, 3s, 4-year-old students. It's not nearly as daunting.
Oh, good.
The masking piece.
Oh, good. Also, there are other counties that are in the red zone or the orange tier or whatever, and we are trying to learn from them. So what is working for them? Are they facing whiplash of having someone be contagious? And so that's also a very important part of putting this all together, is learning from other districts that are doing it, and how are they facing the challenges that we see? How are they dealing with all those challenges? So there's a lot of kind of balls in the air and ways for us to learn about what works and what doesn't work.
So there's an economies of scale when it comes to this, because of size does matter when it comes to looking at cohort displacement. And so what we are looking at specifically from counties that have school districts or numbers of schools that are of the same configuration as ours will be that very question about that are making the movement into some type of a hybrid approach. The challenge on that is that most of those districts have not done so yet. There's a few that are starting this week, literally. Most of those that have scheduled a movement back into hybrid are planning to do that plus minus in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have much better data 3-4 weeks down the road. Most of those schools did not start out, even though they had been in red for some time. Remember, they had to stay in red for a couple weeks and be able to maintain that. Most of those districts are starting up in the next 2 weeks. So we'll be looking at that. I think that's it for now, though. We'll be back. We'll be back with more information to share.
Okay, and moving on to educational services, something better. First reading for board policy 6146.1, high school graduation requirements.
All right, are you ready for more? I'm ready. Let's do this. So the big thing here was a few years ago, Ed Code allowed for a career tech education class to satisfy the fine arts or foreign language high school graduation requirement, but it only could satisfy that graduation requirement if it was an A through G approved CTE course, which limits what can happen. And then that got changed a couple years ago when the state came out with the CTE model curriculum standards, and we have not updated our board policy since then. We haven't updated our board policy in 8 years. So this will allow, starting right now with the current freshmen, it will allow any CTE course to satisfy this high school graduation requirement, and it won't be limited to just the A through G CTE courses.
Oh, good.
And we're not going to make it take effect right now, or it would affect kids who, you know, are already, you know, on their plan and may have already taken an A through G CTE class. So we're going to phase it in with this current freshman crop, and then the old requirement will phase out with the current sophomores upon graduation. And then while we were at it, we went ahead and updated all of the legal changes since 2012, including any and every reference to the California high school exit exam, which has long been gone. And then just some other updates about, you know, honoring or giving out retroactive diplomas. They've added to that list for certain situations for students who've been removed from the state against their will, and veterans of wars and other things like that. So just a lot of updates. And then I changed some of the language from units to credits. I didn't touch the math science related for now.
Oh my God, that was my question.
No, we left that alone. I can't
But
tear off too
why?
because it would just postpone this discussion. So we wanted to make the CTE change, and we can definitely revisit that part at a later date. So those are the
Can
big
you tell
things
me
there.
what a math related subject course is that we offer?
I'd have to look them up.
Sorry, it's okay. I'm just wondering why it's still in there, but it's fine.
Yeah, I figured I'd be biting off more than I could chew if I tried to address that one right now too.
Got it. I love your edits. Your edits are great.
Very easy to read and understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, first reading of Petaluma Joint Union High School's Economics and American Government textbook pages for Casa Grande High School.
So CASA, so our high schools don't typically adopt and pilot textbooks at the same times that our K-8 grades do and schools do. The state approves instructional materials for K-8, but not for high school. There's no state approval. So, schools don't often follow the same cycle and sequence. And what happens is over time, you get schools that are very out of date with certain subjects. So CASA has been working on filling some of those gaps this year. And one of those gaps is updating their econ and government textbooks for seniors. So again, this is another one of those things that at the same time brings us up to Fair Act compliance, because the last time we updated those books was a long time ago, well before the Fair Act. So they're going to be doing this with a number of subjects, and this was just kind of the first big one that we're supporting. So.
Glad to hear they're Fair Act compliant. Any other comments? Okay, future business.
Thank you.
I have something for future business. I've been in contact with the moderator of the Dear Casa pages, and they had told me at some point they would like to present to the board. And recently they contacted me and they decided that what they really wanted to do was do a survey. And so they would like to make a presentation of their findings from that survey. And they would like to be in the first board meeting in October, which would be our next meeting. So I would like that on there for future business for, what is it, October 13th? Is our next board meeting? Do I have that date right? Yeah?
Can you,
13.
Can you just,
oh, sorry, Gary, go ahead.
If you move forward, just send me a little bit of information so that we can write it up for the we'll contact you.
Okay.
I had a record.
And also, the Arts Alliance would like to do a presentation, maybe at the second meeting.
Do you know who would be presenting?
Not offhand, but I'll be able to send that information to you. I have it in my email. I just have to check.
Okay.
Any other future business? Maddie?
Do we know what they surveyed, the Dear Instagram pages?
They have not been real specific with me. Originally, they were talking about wanting to come and talk about some of the stuff that was on those pages, and then they changed tack and decided they wanted to do a survey. I will, that's a great question, Joanna. I will email her, let her know that I put it on for future business, and we'll ask for some more specifics so that and then I can send it to Gary as well.
Okay. I just didn't know if it was something that I'd wanted for future business. I don't know if the next meeting's too compact or not, but just more updates about sexual harassment, how we're speaking to kids about that, like what are, you know, what type of, I guess, classroom guidance we're offering, I guess, to make students aware of what sexual harassment is and how to report it. I assume that that would probably tie in with what the Dear Instagram pages are going to be presenting on.
Absolutely.
And then I know, I'm sorry, I cut someone off.
No, I was just going to say it's that conversation actually came up today in relation to the because we typically do something each year, but this distance vehicle, you know, how do we do that in a distance environment? So we can bring something back on that. I'm not sure about at the next meeting. I think the next meeting is going to be a doozy because it's related to the, you know, moving under week 13, but we'll definitely, we probably bring it at the following.
Okay.
That second one.
But the presentation I would like for next meeting.
Yeah, I've got that down. I got that down.
And then also kind of along that same vein, I know some of us attended the SCO forum on, was that last Wednesday? And there was a cost to student there. And I mean, some of the things that the kids were discussing were like really troubling. And I know that we've started along this vein with, you know, with Circle Up, which is, you know, going to take some time, but I don't know, like at some point if we need to have our own type of discussion or hear from students as well, like as a board, either as like a special meeting or in a regular board meeting. And I'm sure we could tie Circle Up and Liz in there with all of that as well. And then something that Corey spoke about in public comment, like have we changed our, like the reading materials? Because it sounds like from what a lot of those kids were saying, like those are the same books I was reading 25 years ago myself in high school. Like, are we making all parts of our curriculum more inclusive and diverse for students so that they feel comfortable?
So Joanna, I think at least to that particular piece, we could ask for at a future meeting, have the district librarians present on how materials get purged, because there's a purging process that takes place. And I don't know the specifics on that, but I do know that they lead that with not only the secondary schools, but with the elementary, and how are materials selected for their stocks at the libraries.
And what
that all takes place at the site level.
What about audits of what's used in what's used in the classrooms?
Yeah.
And recruitment of faculty and staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of tied together, isn't it?
But I think back to your first comment, you know, the format for, it seems like the format for the discussions about, you know, talking to students, coming in with a, you know, like 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 open-ended types of questions, I think is really conducive to a study session. That's one single item that we stay focused on. And so maybe we can talk about that off on the side and see if we can come up with something to do.
What about like when we're training kids about using Stop It? That would seem like a really good place to talk about how to recognize those things, like sexual harassment.
Yeah, yeah.
Seems like they would go together.
And just one thing for future at some point, I know we just completed the first grading period, and I was just talking with a couple teachers, and it seems like a lot of kids are struggling. So it's like, what kind of academic supports are we offering? I mean, I know it's so hard now with Zoom. I mean, I know Kenilworth had homework club and other schools had after school supports, but how are we still reaching these kids during distance learning that are struggling academically?
Good question.
I agree.
So it sounds like we've got an agenda full for several meetings at this
Yeah, we
point.
do. It's all good stuff. It's good stuff, though.
Important stuff. Any other future business that people would like to see? Okay, well, in that case, Michelle, I'll come in tomorrow to sign papers. We do not need to adjourn to closed session. Ooh, there's no action on items heard in closed session. So I believe we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming to our.
Thank you for coming.
So many people at our Zoom meetings. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.